Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be
So,
here.
oh yeah, good. What is your sober date?
Um, February was 10 years.
10 years in February.
Yep, last February.
February what?
I'm not sure the exact date is quite a ride, so probably about the 20th.
Okay. Now, what was going on in February that you got sober?
Well, I had relapsed after being sober for 9 years, and my mom took my kids. The welfare and my mom took my kids, and I decided I would I relapsed for about 4 months, end up ODing that night, and decided I didn't want that life no more. So I packed my stuff and moved.
So, where
Left
are
my
you
kids with my
from?
mom.
Where are you from
I'm from
originally?
Idaho.
Is that where you're at now?
Yes, it is. I'm back at my mom's house right now.
Oh, okay. So you were born in Idaho.
Yep.
I think you're my first Idahoan on my show. I've had people from all over the place, but I don't think Idaho yet. I can't. Nothing sticks in my mind for Idaho.
Yep.
Um, what was it like being born? Were you with brothers and sisters?
Yep. I have a brother and a sister. Mom and dad were together till I was 12, and they ended up splitting up, and that's when my mom started using coke, and my dad started
Okay.
drinking. I was born into a family of addicts.
I was just gonna ask that. Are you the oldest, the youngest, middle?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest, so you're the one
Yep.
like I'm the oldest of three too, and I was the one to make all the bad decisions so that my brother and sister never had to.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually the only one out of um the three of us that's sober right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My sister and brother drink, but like they're regular drinkers. They're not like alcoholic drinkers. They're definitely normies where they don't like go overboard, and I think they did not get that from me. If anything, they learned from my mistakes and they decided not to go down the same path I was going down.
I
I
wish
seen
mine
it.
would have. My sister just actually got out of prison the 6th of this month, and we haven't seen her since. So I'm sure she's out using again. And my brother, he's a seasonal user. In the summer, while he's working, he stays sober. In the winter, when he has nothing to do because he does construction, in Idaho we get a lot of snow. He uses while he's bored. So
Okay. Well, you said your parents split up when you were 12
yeah,
and you went with your mom.
nope. I stayed with my dad. My mom was hooked on coke.
Oh,
So
okay.
I stayed with my dad. My siblings went with my mom.
Is that why they broke up? Is because of Coke?
No, I think they had personal reasons. My grandma had died that year, and it was just really hard for my mom. So
Okay. And so you went with your dad and your brother and sister went with your mom. Were you
yep.
like split so you got to see your mom, or no, you just were with your
No,
dad all the time?
I my mom because she was on drugs. I didn't want to have anything to do with her.
Okay. What did you discover first, drugs or alcohol?
Um, I was probably 13, 14 when I started drinking and smoking marijuana. And about
Okay.
15, 16 when my mom taught me how to smoke coke, crack
So
cocaine.
you're really you jumped quite up from marijuana and alcohol into doing smoking crack.
Yeah, I did.
Did you go back with your mom?
Yeah, I did. I moved in with my mom after that. Stayed with her. Um, got really bad. Hooked on coke. I caught felony charges by the time I was 18. My first felonies. I was 18 when I got my first felony charges for um writing bad checks.
Well, let's backtrack a little bit because I don't want to get too far ahead and forget. Because I'm trying to piece it all together.
Okay.
So you're 15 years old. You're into smoking weed and you're drinking.
Yeah.
Did you choose to move back in with your mom, or
Yeah, my dad had become quite an abusive drunk, so I chose to go live with my mom for a while, and that's when she was like, "Hey, I'm going to show you what this is." So that way, because I guess the friends I was hanging out with were doing it, and I didn't know. She was like, "That way, they can't get you high and take advantage of you." So I'm gonna let you teach you how to, what this drug is. So
that's one way to parent?
yeah, it was pretty rough, and yeah, so we did that for a while and moved into her boyfriend's house, and he was her dealer at the time, so we moved in with him. and I just continued to smoke coke until I was probably, I'm thinking probably about 17.
And so, are you still going to school during all this?
I had dropped out of school my senior year. I was still doing coke and going to school, getting good grades. I dropped out with 4 credits and a 3.5 GPA, so
How come you
I
dropped
dropped
out
out
then?
because I was more worried about being high than being in school.
And your teachers had no idea?
No, no,
So
just my mom and
you were good
just
at
my mom and
hiding.
her boyfriend. So
And were your brother and sister smoking too with you?
yeah, my sister did. My brother had moved back in with my dad, and my sister was living with us at the time. And she started causing trouble when she was at a young age too, but she wasn't really into drugs until she got a little bit older.
Okay. And the story's not about her, it's about you. So
Yeah.
you said you were 18 when you caught your first felony. What were you doing?
Um, I was stealing chicks and writing them out to buy drugs.
Who were you stealing checks from? You don't mind me asking.
My boyfriend's aunt. He was stealing them from her, and I was writing them out and cashing them. So I
Okay.
caught the charge, and he didn't.
Were you using together?
Yep, we were.
So that was your way to get money in for both of you to get drugs.
Yes.
Okay. Did you serve any time for doing this?
Nope. I actually did serve some time in county. I did 78 days in solitary confinement in county for that. I got a probation violation because I couldn't stay sober.
Did you say 78 days in solitary?
Yeah. I live in a really, really small town where they housed, at the time they were housing females, and then the they didn't have enough room for 2 day rooms. So I spent all my time in one room by myself.
They didn't have room for two, you said day rooms?
Yeah. So like the TV room and stuff like that where everybody eat, there was only one room, and if I wanted to go out, the boys would be locked down. There's a lot more men than I was the only female in there, so
Wow. And for 78 days, that's a long time
yeah,
for an 18-year-old.
it was.
Were you 17 or 18?
I was 18 when I went to jail, but I was 17 when I caught the charge.
And they charged you when you were an adult.
Yeah.
So you get out of 78 days. Were you on probation then?
Yep, and still using. I continue to use. I decided that I was going to stop doing coke and was doing what they call dirty crank. It wasn't like crystal meth. It was crank mix, bathtub crank, homemade crank mixed with heroin.
So that's quite the jump from crack cocaine.
Yeah, I've thought I was doing something better because I thought I could control that, and I couldn't control that either. So
All right. So you're 18 and are you back with the same boyfriend?
yeah, I actually was with him for a couple more months after that, and then I
Were
ended up
you
leaving
living at
him.
home with your mom again when you got out?
Yes, we were all living out in Teton. They had property. My boyfriend at the time was her boyfriend's brother. So we all kind of
Oh,
lived in a trailer court together.
okay. So the dealer that you lived with your mom, his brother was your age,
He was
and he
a couple years older, but yeah.
okay, but yeah, his younger brother and you started dating.
Yeah.
Okay, keeping it in the family.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a small world, I guess, and you were probably from a small town in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere,
really small town in the middle of nowhere, Idaho.
so you weren't like in Boise where you were like in the city.
Nope, on complete other side of the state.
Okay. Um, so you get out and you go right back with your mom and doing the same. Well, no, you weren't doing the same shit because you decided that you weren't going to use crack cocaine anymore, right?
Yeah, I decided that crank was better for me for some reason.
And especially mixed with heroin because what's the withdrawal like from crack?
It was pretty rough. I went to rehab for it. I went to jail. It was just it was rough for the first couple days, but it wasn't as bad as everybody thought it was. I mean, everybody says that withdrawals are horrid, but I, it just wasn't that bad for me.
Was is there? I know meth. There's psychosis involved. Is there any psychosis involved with crack?
A little bit, yeah. There's a lot of paranoia. The boyfriend I had at the time was every time he would get high, he'd get paranoid, and he would either beat me or lock me in the room and not let me leave the room. So there was a lot of abuse in that relationship.
Okay. Um. There we go. So now you get out of that relationship, and you're still living with your mom, and now you're doing crank,
Yep.
which is mixed with heroin,
Yep.
which I'm well aware of those withdrawals. They're not easy.
Yeah, that it wasn't. My
Did
mom
you?
actually had left her boyfriend about that time, moved to St. Anthony. My sister had a baby when she was 15, so my mom left and got sober. Well, she didn't get sober. She left and moved back to St. Anthony, and I moved with her to St. Anthony to help her raise my nephew, and still just sold crank the whole time I was living with her. And you, being I was her dealer at the time. I went from buying from somebody to starting selling for everybody.
How are you
And,
getting the connection at that young age?
because in this little town I live in, there's a lot of Hispanics, and I speak Spanish, perfect Spanish. So it was quite easy for me to get it.
Okay, because nobody else could speak in their language in order to acquire weight.
Yeah.
Okay, that adds up. And you start dealing. Do you eventually get caught?
Yes, I did. I got caught. I was, I actually had broke up with that boyfriend and started dating another guy who was a dealer. Another dealer. I started dating him, and I got caught with two charges in two different counties, but I got caught with two charges in Madison County, Idaho, and I got found out I was pregnant when I went to jail with my Well, I had a kid before that. I back up a little bit. I had a son. He and I just kept using and dealing and using and dealing, and kind of left him with my mom for months at a time, and would just disappear and come back and disappear and come back. And then when I started dating this new guy, um, he was my dealer, but we were dating, and then I ended up getting busted for in like 2004 for delivery, two charges of delivery in Madison County, and I went to jail and found out I was pregnant at the time with my 19-year-old. And then I got out and got sober. I got sober because I didn't want to have my kid in prison, and then I got rearrested when I was about 8 months pregnant with him for my two charges in Fremont County for his delivery of methamphetamines.
So you were getting charged with basically trafficking.
Yeah, and there
So
were small amounts, but it's still meth. It was still meth at that time. It advanced from crank to we were the first ones. Me and my friends were the first ones to bring actual crystal meth from southern Idaho into eastern Idaho, and we started dealing to the Mexicans up here and our friends up here. So
so you were traveling to go get it then.
yeah. Yeah, we would go. My mom worked at the bar at night, so we would go borrow her car and drive 2 hours down there and 2 hours back really quick, and bring back ounces and ounces of meth to to sell up
Oh,
here.
I like that you say a 4 hour trip is a quick trip.
Yeah, yeah, and she really had no clue. She thought we were just hanging out at home in her car. She had no idea that we were, because she was sober by then, so she had no clue that we were using her car to traffic drugs.
Yeah. And you get caught. No, you. Let's. I'm confused. You because you said you got charged for Fremont.
Yep, I got charged in two separate counties. The first one was when I was first pregnant with my 19-year-old in 2004, 2005. No, it was in 2004. And then at the end of 2004, I got charged again for charges in Fremont County. But I was sober by then, and I was actually in I was actually sober by then, and was going to inpatient classes, outpatient classes, and trying to keep my life together and keep my kids and stuff like that. And
Because how old were you at that time?
I was like 25, 26.
Okay. And so you're 25, 26, and you decide you're going to keep it together
Yeah.
for your kids.
Yep.
You had two at that point.
Yep. At that point, I was, like I said, I got charged, and like my son was born in January. I got my second charge in December. I was right there getting ready to have him, and they were like, "Nope, we're gonna give you a chance." I had a really good judge that believed in rehab before prison, and since I was already in classes and trying to get my stuff together, he let me finish my classes out and just do probation.
So you got lucky that you got like a lenient judge.
Yeah, I really did. He was a really good judge. He really believed in rehab before prison. He didn't think that sending people to prison would get them sober. So
How much time were you looking at if you had to go to prison?
I got 10 years probation, so I was looking at least 5 years in prison.
10 years probation.
Yeah. I was scared. I wouldn't even jaywalk. I was terrified.
That's a long probation.
Yeah. I actually got off in 2 years because I done so good and cleaned up my act and then paid off all my fines and just worked the whole time.
I was only on probation one time. It was a 6-month probation, and they gave me 100 hours of community service, and I had $4,300 in restitution that I had to pay because it was for a petty theft.
Yeah.
Well, misdemeanor theft, and because I think over 5,000 would have been a felony offense, but since it was 4,300, I got lucky.
Yeah.
I didn't steal dollars. I stole jewelry and pawned it. So it's not like I had $4,300 in drug money. Like, you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
probably made $200 total.
Probably.
And maybe even that could be over exaggerated.
Yeah.
um, so I got 6 months probation, and I did my community service right away, and I paid my restitution right away, and they ended up letting me go within 3 months.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't being drug tested. Like they said, my probation officer said to me, usually if you were doing monthly drug tests, we would hold you for the entire 6 months to finish out your, make sure you were pissing clean. But since
Yeah.
you're done with community service and since you paid the restitution, we're going to end your first offense. We're going to let you off early. So I immediately went back to like smoking weed. I was already still doing pills the entire time I was on probation. That didn't slow me down. I was still taking Xanax every day. I was still taking oxycodone every day. I was prescribed it.
I wasn't into pills very much.
I was prescribed those pills. So if they drug tested me, I would have had a script to show them, and they wouldn't be able to say anything about it.
Yeah.
So I got lucky that they didn't throw the book at me.
Yeah.
Later on, when I was arrested again in 2018, and they tried to charge me with intent to distribute in the school zone.
Oh no.
And I had I had 20 pills on me, and they were all for me. I had a huge pill problem, so they were all for me. And the cop followed me from my dealer's house and then pulled me over in the school zone. So
he knew you had it on you.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like I was in a school zone, like, here, kiddies, like, come get your pills. He pulled me over in the school zone and tried to hit me with intent to distribute in the school zone. And the judge knew that. And I had already gone to rehab and got my life straightened out too. And he ended up letting me go with just a fine. And again, I got lucky. So now you're clean for the first time. Are you working any kind of program?
I was doing an outpatient program. It was a really good one because by then I had my husband I was with at the time, my dealer that I was with at the time. I was pregnant with our second kid, so I had 2 kids within a year, and I was doing the program, taking my kids with me because I had a daycare there. I was driving. Idaho Falls is like 30 minutes from here, so I was driving back and forth every day. Couldn't get a job because I was doing program from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. But I was just trying to, stay sober and keep my stuff together for my kids. And
were you doing any kind of meetings?
I wasn't. I didn't do any meetings. I just did the classes.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. That's a long time of 8 hours a day. Is that 5 days a week?
Yep, it was Monday through Friday.
Yeah, it's hard to even have a job if you're doing that 8 to 4 and you still have two kids to worry about.
Yep. And I think at that time my husband was deported. He was illegal, so he was deported at the time. He'd gotten in trouble, so he'd been deported. So I was trying to take care of two kids and relying on my mom and dad to help me with, well, three kids by then, relying on my mom and dad to help me with that, and it was pretty rough.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Was your mom still sober?
Yep. My mom got sober. My nephew's 28, so my mom got sober 27 years ago because she ended up having to take my nephew from my sister. So she got sober to take care of him.
It's ironic that she wasn't sober with you guys with you,
Yeah.
but she got sober for her grandson.
Yeah.
But it takes what it takes sometimes.
Yeah.
And how long did you have that program for? 2 years?
I was in the program about 8 months, and then I just did probation. I got really lucky. I had really awesome probation officers. I live in a really small town, so I still see them randomly. They're not probation officers anymore, but I'll see them randomly on the streets, and they'll stop and talk to me and see how everything's doing and stuff. So I got really lucky with good POs that were just like, you have too many kids to come down to the office. I'll just do house meetings with you. So again, you gotta drag your kids out of the house, and they're really good people.
That's awesome. Were you being drug tested that entire
Yep.
time too?
Yes, I was.
Like monthly?
Yeah.
So you do the program for 8 months, and for the next 2 years, was it? Where that you were being drug tested every month?
Yep.
And then once you were done in probation, you were able to like stay clean, stay sober.
Yeah. I
And
was.
no alcohol either.
Nope. I didn't start drinking until I guess my husband and me had been together for 9 years, and we had our third child. So by then I had four kids, and he'd been deported and back and forth a couple times. So um, he got charged with sexual assault on a minor, two charges, and so he got deported. He got arrested in April of 2009, I think, and my grandpa died that same year in May. So I just started drinking. I I didn't even smoke cigarettes. I was completely sober. I wasn't allowed to smoke, wasn't allowed to have friends, wasn't allowed to have a job, wasn't allowed to do anything but stay home and be a mom. And so when he left, I just went a little hog wild, started drinking a lot and running around and going to bars all the time, and
Because
then
that's like
got
your
pretty.
first time. That's like your first time being free from like
Yeah,
kind of shackles.
yeah, from a
Because
pretty he was pretty narcissistic. He was using and drinking all the time, and I was sitting at home being a mom and housewife. So he was very narcissistic, and it was pretty rough on me. So when he left, and like I said, my grandpa died right after that, and it was for me. It was I didn't even see it coming. My relapse, I never saw coming at all. I was on clonazepam, which is a Valium, and I was also on not Adderall, the other one that's like Adderall. I can't remember what it's called.
um, something with an M, and I'm blanking
Yeah,
on the name.
yeah, I'm blanking on them too.
My wife takes it for her MS, and I'm just blanking on the name. Um, and I was into Valium myself when I had my relapse last year. I was prescribed Ativan, and then I convinced my psychiatrist to prescribe me Valium instead. And then I realized you could snort Valium, so I started snorting my Valium.
Hmm. Yep. I
So,
realized if I snorted mine together, it was a lot better.
what is that?
I realized if I snorted them at the same time, I mean, I never saw the heroin addiction coming. I mean, I probably saw the meth relapse coming, but not the heroin addiction. After that, it was because I was snorting both at the same time, and just the level-headed feeling that I had from having both drugs in my system was a lot better than just being strung out on meth or pills and stuff. I felt like I felt level-headed, like I could control it all.
So you're a single mom. You were a single mom of how many? Three or four?
Or
Four.
yeah,
And were you living by yourself?
I was living in my own trailer that I'd paid for. I'd bought and paid for by it with my own money, and had my 4 kids, and just
Were you working?
I was working full time. I was working a night job, so I worked from 12 at night till 8 in the morning so I could be there with my kids during the day. I had 3 in school and 1 that wasn't in school, so one would go daycare while I slept during the day, and then I'd pick him up, and I could have dinner with my kids and time with them after school, and I was doing, like I said, I was drinking on my days off or whatever, but it was just
It was more
you
like
know,
regular drinking. It wasn't out of hand drinking yet.
yeah. It was just hanging out with my friends that were in the same trailer court as me, and we'd hang out and drink, or sometimes irresponsibly, we'd go booze cruise, load up the kids in the car, and we'd all go drinking and driving around the desert and stuff, and
Yeah, I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere. It's not like you're driving through a city drunk.
yeah.
So I get that. And when does it? And at this point, you're starting to take your what was it? The Valium?
Clonazepam, it's
Yep,
Valium.
yep. Oh, I
Yeah,
know. CVS is trying to get me back. I went into my CVS app earlier. I get nicotine gum through CVS. My insurance covers nicotine gum, so I get a whole entire box a month for $1.
yeah,
And earlier, I logged into my CVS app, and it says, medication refills, and one of them is for Valium. And I've told them countless times I'm allergic to it. Stop trying to give it to me. And
yeah.
it's in my list for a refill. So yeah, I'm
And that's just a
well
relapse waiting to happen right there.
well aware of what the Valiums are called.
Yeah, yeah,
So um so you basic we'll call it Adderall just for namesake. So Adderall
yeah.
and Valium same time. And are you doing this while you're drinking on the weekends?
Yep, I was doing that, back to smoking marijuana. I would just kinda went off the deep end of like I said, it just it was a gradual slide. It wasn't like I just one day was, like, smoking marijuana and snorting pills as I would snort my pills, and then I, start smoking some marijuana every once in a while, and started getting back around those people that I knew I couldn't hang out with and I couldn't be friends with because they were all using. All my childhood friends were still using, and I'd been sober, and it just I started using meth again, and my mom ended up taking my kids from me, and at that point, it was like I had nothing else. I decided I had nothing to stay sober for.
And that's when you got back into doing meth again, hardcore.
Yep, and that's when I started doing meth, and I had never touched a needle at that point in time. I had promised myself my entire life that I would never be in my mind, I would never be a needle junkie. I would never be a junkie like that, and that's what I always would call it was, people who use needles are junkies, and people who, just smoke meth or do meth or, they're addicts, obviously, but they're not, hardcore junkies and running around selling their bodies for drugs and things like that, and that's kind of what I thought a needle junkie was, so I was just at that time smoking it and stuff.
Smoking heroin.
No, just meth at the time.
Oh, okay. You were just smoking meth.
Yeah.
And who introduces you to heroin? Because that's quite the jump up from meth.
Yeah, it was probably about a month into me using meth. I was with a friend who, we were at a house and I'd been up for a couple days, and she was telling me, you know, Amanda, you're too high. You got to come down some. I can't, we can't be going out in public like this. You're really messed up and you're twitching and all that. And I was like, I don't, just please don't stick that needle in my arm. Please don't do that to me. Don't ruin my life like that. And she was really persistent about it and was like, just turn around, close your eyes. It's not going to be a big deal. And she shot me up with heroin for the first time. And then it was just like a downhill spiral from there.
Because you liked it.
Yeah. I liked it. And it was really horrible because I'd get too high on the meth, and then she'd shoot me up with too much heroin. So then she'd have to shoot me up with meth to to kind of level it all out so I wasn't puking my guts out and sick. Because when you overdose on heroin, you puke and you get really, like, really, really sick. And I overdosed quite a few times to the point where I couldn't even get off the couch to go to the bathroom because every movement made me throw up. So she would shoot me up with meth to level it back out, and it was just kind of a back and forth. Let's do this, and then, oh well, you're too high on this, so let's give you some of this. And I hadn't seen my kids, and I think by that time I hadn't seen my kids in about 2 months.
Because you were daily using. Were you still
Yep.
working?
Nope, I wasn't. I was running around with my friends, just daily using, driving down to Utah, picking up meth, and from my, I had friends and family down in Utah that were meth dealers, so I would drive down to Utah and pick up meth from them, and come back up here and sell meth and feed my habit.
So you were supporting your habit by selling meth.
Yep.
That was my next question. Was doing meth and heroin all day is not cheap.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense. And how long does this go on for?
It was about 4 months. About 4 months, and then I moved back into St. Anthony. Was trying really hard to get my shit together. My mom had my kids. I actually had gone to court one time about 2 months into it, and the judge asked me. He says, "If I gave you your children back today, what would you say to me?" And I looked him straight in the eyes, and I told him that I could not. I could not in any way, shape, or form take care of my own children, let alone myself at that time. And he told me that he had never had a parent that didn't just come in there crying and begging for their children back. I was the first one that he'd ever seen that was dead honest about the fact that my addiction was so out of control that I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone my children. So,
Did he send
and
you
my
to
kids were
rehab?
good. No, I was supposed to be doing random UAs, classes, counseling, all that with my kids, and I was just so high I didn't want any of it. I would skip court. I wouldn't go to court, and I came home that year for Thanksgiving to spend some time with my kids, and I had my oldest son. He was probably maybe about 10 at the time. And it wasn't really my breaking point, but it was a really hard time with me because he told me, he says, "Mom," he says, "you just promised me that I'm not going to lose my little brothers." He says, don't let me be separated from my brothers no matter what happens." And I was like, okay. I says, "No matter what happens, I'll make sure you stay at grandma's house with your brothers." So I dipped out, and it just made me feel worse than I already felt, because I knew that he knew and my kids knew I was using. It was no secret. I didn't lie to them. So I left again, left for a couple more months, and ended up, well, I didn't leave. I still stayed in St. Anthony, but I didn't get to see them. And then I ended up overdosing. So
What was the final straw?
I think it was the overdose. My mom was bartending, and I had OD'd. Somebody hot shotted me, gave me too much meth, and I went into the bar and was going in there to get my mom to call the ambulance because I was dying. I knew I was going to die. And she called the cops on me, threw my purse at me, told me to get out, that I was going to go to jail if I had anything on me. And I don't remember about 8 or 9 hours of that night. And I had a friend at the time that was like, "I'm done watching you act like this. I'm done watching you die slowly." He's like, and so he paid his mom to drive me to Kemmer, Wyoming, which is about 5 hours away, to go live with his sister who had never done drugs in her whole life. And I went and lived there and got sober.
Did you ever get into going to meetings?
I didn't. I did it all on my own. I went down there and I laid on her couch and I detoxed off heroin and meth all by myself. I was pretty sick. It was pretty rough for the first week. I couldn't get off the couch. I was really sick. I couldn't eat. And then I got up, got a job. I promised I was going to do everything I could to get home and get my kids back.
How long did you stay in Wyoming?
I was there 3 or 4 months. About 3 or 4 months, I came back and I moved back and I lived with my mom for a while, got a full-time job, was spending time with my kids every day. And then I ended up getting my own place, and my mom was giving, she had and I had to give her custody of my kids, sign over custody of guardianship of my children to her, because welfare was like, she's not doing anything to clean up her life, and we're at the point where we're just gonna have to ship these kids out to foster homes. And I remember promising my kid that I would never let them be separated. So I gave my mom guardianship of my kids. So I let her have guardianship, and I was sober at that time, and that was probably the hardest part because I wasn't high when I gave her guardianship. I was sober. I'd been sober for about 4 months at that time, and I had to still give her guardianship, and it was probably the worst. Like I said, the worst feeling in the world, knowing that I wasn't doing it because I was high. I had to do it to keep my kids together.
That makes sense. So, like, it sucks looking back on it, and
Yeah.
well, it sucks in the moment, but looking back on it, it was the best thing for them.
Yep, and it was. It kept them together, and it gave me. And then I thought, my mom having custody of my kids, it would be so much easier for me to get them back, and welfare was still involved. And then I started dating a guy that I'm now married to. We've been together 10 years, and he wasn't sober when we first started hanging out. He was using meth, and I told him, I said, I can't be with you. I'm trying to get my kids back, and he's 15 years younger than me, so he was only 20 at the time, and I was 35, and he was, he's like, all right, he's like, whatever we got to do together to get your kids, he's like, that's what we're going to do. And we were going to family counseling. He was going to the random UAs with me with the welfare office. He did everything he had to with me to get my kids back.
That's awesome.
Yep. And it was probably about a year and a half. And the courts finally gave me back my kids, cut full custody back of my kids. So,
And so that's been 10 years now.
yep. He's been sober since August 2nd, 10 years. And I've been sober since like February 20th, 10 years.
That's awesome.
Yep.
It really is. And, you two doing it together, I'm sure brings you closer together too.
Yep. And it's really rough because a lot of people tell you, you put one sober person or one addict that's sober with an addict that's using, and it's always going to be a downfall. There's always that shot that you're both going to end up using again, and you're
Yeah.
just going to destroy your lives. And he actually, for the first year and a half we were together, was still snorting pills, hydrocodone. He was still snorting pills, and I was getting them for him. I was going to the doctor, and the doctor was just handing them to me for whatever reason I wanted them for, and I was getting him pills, and he was still snorting pills for the first year and a half we were together. But he never let my kids see it or anything, and he ended up ODing one time when I think he OD'd. He snorted like 30 of them in one day, and ended up ODing, and he was like, "That's it." He's like, "I can't." He's like, "I can't let our kids see us like this." He's like, "Those are my boys." He's like, "And I can't let them live a life of, that we lived." So
Yeah. It's definitely sometimes it takes a traumatic event like an overdose where you almost die for you to realize what the greater good is.
yeah. And I didn't when I was in active use. I didn't care. I had nothing else to live for. If I OD'd, I OD'd. To me, it was no big deal. And then when I finally did OD, it was like, God, my poor kids are not gonna have mom, because I have two nephews that my mom is raised, because my sister's an active addict. She's in and out of prison all the time, and like I said, she's been out for a while, and nobody seen her, so she's obviously out using again. But I helped my mom raise my nephews, so it wasn't just my four kids I had to be there for. It was, I had to be there for my nephews too and help them out in life.
Yeah, for sure. That's a lot to oversee, you know.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
they're all probably grown up, right?
Yep. My youngest is 16, and I have a 23-year-old and 19, 23, 19, 18, and 16. And then I have nephews that are 27, and my one nephew is 23, and he's actually a CO at the 5 county. It's a children's jail here in St. Anthony. It's a detention center for children.
So
So he really took a different route.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome that he's doing that and he didn't fall into the like grips of addiction, because you hear so much that people are born an addict, from if they're born with somebody who is in active use and they're born, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
You end up being that person. And I've always said that you always become what you hate the most, because you fixate on hating that person or that thing that they're doing so much in life that you end up becoming it. And I've watched it a million times with family members and friends. And I'll never do that. I hate my mom because she uses. I'll never do that. I hate my dad because he uses. And it's, you end up becoming that addict because you focus so much on hating that person that that's what you become. And I've seen a lot of people do that, and I'm really like, none of my kids. I mean, they drink. They're social drinkers. My youngest isn't. My 6-year-old isn't a social drinker, but my oldest kids are. My oldest three. My nephews are social drinkers, but they've never been into drugs.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you're not a social drinker anymore.
No, I don't drink. My husband drinks. He's a social drinker. I don't drink. I don't like the thought of even getting a DUI. Terrifies me. So I do not. Nope. I don't drink at all.
Yeah, you've been, clean from the law for this long. You don't want
Yeah.
to tempt fate.
Yeah, that's kind of what scares me. Is I was 9 years sober before I relapsed, and I'm like, I'm on 10 years. I don't want to mess this up. So
Yeah, that's good to hear, Amanda.
yeah,
Well, I'm glad you had the chance to sit down and tell your story because I know you probably don't get the chance to talk about it often.
no,
So,
no people. I live in a very small town, so people here know me. They know what I've done. They know who I've been, and I mean, even the cops are still cops from when I was getting in trouble when I was younger. And I mean, I went through a lot of loss and heartache, and I never relapsed over it. I lost my dad in 2018, and I sat in a hospital room with him for 4 days after he had four major strokes in one night. And I sat in the hospital room with him for 4 days, and I never used after that. It wasn't even an option for me to numb the pain with drugs or any of that. And then 5 months later, I lost twin girls. And that still wasn't, you know, a lot of people are always like, you have this, you know, this traumatic event happens to you, and that's your reason to relapse. You got to use to cope. My family did it. My brother and sister both did it. They started using to cope with my dad's death, and I was like, no, I won't be that person again.
you lost twins? Like you were
Yeah.
pregnant?
I was pregnant. I was 9 weeks pregnant, and I ended up losing twin girls.
Yeah, that's a
And
lot.
that still didn't make me relapse. I still stayed sober.
Well, you're definitely a testament to willpower and, thinking good thoughts and making the right choices now.
Yeah, you have to be. It comes to a point in life when you have to stop blaming everybody else for your problems. You have to be a grown up. It's not your mom and dad's fault you're an addict. It's not. It's your fault. You're an adult. You did it to yourself.
Yep.
And you really got to see that.
Yep. Well, thank you again for sitting down and being so open with your story, Amanda. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for letting me share with you.
Oh, of course. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
See ya.
See you. Bye.